The choice before a modern about exactly what to partake of and exactly what to refuse on the basis of how local it is, again, maybe, knowing where things come from in general gives you more kind of control and knowledge in a way that allows you to act with more responsibility. But there's a limit to how far you can take that. And part of what the Torah does is it says, look, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made the world. You let him worry about how the whole world is run, and you have what's in front of you. And it is good and right for you to show the most concern for that which is most immediately under your control and available to your observation. And yes, you can have some more distant concern for things that kind of go out in expanding circles beyond that. But there are, commandments to fulfill in the here and now. And maybe there's someone in need who is in front of you, and that is more important than whether or not you've been able to fully trace all the different economic transactions that led you to be able to buy bread to eat, and figured out whether there was any wrong done on the other side of the world when the grain was being bought or imported or exported or whatever. Maybe what you should be concerned with is, oh, look, here's a starving person in my neighborhood and I have bread and he doesn't, and I can share the bread with him. And maybe that's the right frame to put on things on the one hand. So it's, lo rechukahi, it's not far away from you what the Torah actually expects of you. You start with what's close to you. And yet, at the same time, there is also this idea of ki mitzion tetzeh Torah u'davar Adonai Yerushalayim, right? That Torah should emanate from a place. It should emanate from Eretz Yisrael. That it actually isn't so great to send Am Yisrael to be these sort of dispersed, scattered little pockets of Lot amidst the other societies of the world that are run according to the mores and gods of other societies. That the goal is to create a Judaic society. And part of the point and the benefit of that is that if you can create a society where there's enough commonality of commitment to Torah, then the basis of trust becomes much greater in terms of what you can expect from the behavior of others, because you know them and you know what their commitments are, right? That you have a rich basis on which to kind of test, what do I have in common with these other people that I'm encountering? Well, I talk to them and I find that they also know a lot about Torah and a lot about the details of how you act in this situation and how you act in that situation. And before you know it, there are a lot of things that you can know with more confidence without seeing them, because you have some idea of the other people that you're dealing with, right? Like if you live in a society with hundreds of millions of people spread over a whole continent like America, where any given person mostly is a stranger, then you know much less about what they will do or won't do in any given situation. And when your whole life is a chain of transactions amongst that set of people, you're exposed to a lot more radical uncertainty about exactly what you are entangled with or implicated, in as you go, further out. Like what's being done in your name, what's being done in order for you to get what you're requesting or purchasing, what have you, the political and the economic aspects. Whereas if you're in Eretz Yisrael, which is a small place that you actually can walk from one side of to the other, and you're there with other people who are showing their commitment to Torah in a variety of different ways, externally and sharing in public expressions of that, and doing things that are difficult for them, that make you see, in a sense, that this is a person who is committed to doing things that are difficult for himself for the sake of Hashem, and that makes me sort of trust that he also knows what the halacha would be in this other situation. You start to have a lot more confidence. It's sort of like, well, I don't know how you got this loaf of bread, but I don't think you murdered someone for it, right? Not that you're actually worrying that someone murdered someone else for a loaf of bread when you buy it in America, but I'm putting, again, things in extreme terms. The point is that there is it's not just a sense of locality, it's a sense of locality cross multiplied with high content signage about alignment of procedures for moral decision making. And the more that basis of trust can spread, the more you can know things without needing to see them, because you can trust that you're part of a society that is going to, in general, have higher trust or more trustworthy decision making about a variety of issues that could arise, right? So you buy something from this guy who bought it from this other guy who imported it from this other guy, and if that is an unbroken chain of tzaddikim, then you're less worried that at any point along the way that there was some kind of crime or exploitation that was necessary in order to provide you with what you're purchasing, or to get you, the thing that you're being given. And I think that there are really relevant present day examples to this, or the examples of this that come up, because again, I would say that the nastiest version of a kind of a perversion of the Hebrew prophetic voice is the Marxist or neo-Marxist society is evil, let's destroy it kind of way of talking, which is a common refrain in one version or another on the hard left, either in economic terms or in political terms. In economic terms, the idea is there always are people who have less. You can always point out that there are people who have less, and then you can claim the entire society is morally bankrupt because some people seem to be losing out economically. And in fact, in general, Marxist or hard left agendas seek to replace the society that they're criticizing with ones that are more oppressive. And so they don't necessarily offer an alternative that would reduce oppression, but they purport to call out oppression and take the side of the oppressed as a cynical means to calling for the destruction of society as we know it. And so you always have that kind of economic argument that someone's willing to make. But the grain of truth in it, the sort of voice of the Hebrew prophet, that it is fair for us to hear in it enough to at least be willing to ask ourselves, well, how do I know that this argument is bogus or doesn't make sense? Why shouldn't I listen to it? The grain of truth that's there is you should at some level be worried. Well, okay, I don't see myself robbing people every day. I don't see myself murdering people every day, but should I be worried that although I'm not doing those things, that the comforts that I enjoy or the success that I feel myself to enjoy in some way actually is somehow invisibly being sort of wrung from the suffering of others that are swept from view? And how can I be sure that my own society isn't just the same as the one that Yeshayahu excoriated, and it's just that it's more sort of inconspicuous somehow, but really I am also one of these corrupt murderers that these miratzchim that Yeshayahu is talking about. How can I be sure of that? And so it is, we can be sure at the outset that Marxists are, at the end of the day, nasty disruptors who just want to destroy society and replace it with repression. That is very clear from the lessons of the 20th century. But even if we know that to be true empirically and historically, it still is interesting to understand better how to give answer to them when they strike the pose of an Amos or of a Yeshayahu, because there's some very nasty Marxists and hard leftists who will literally say, "Oh, I love Amos. I love the prophetic voice of the Hebrew Bible. I'm all about that," because they'll twist it and they'll they'll say, oh yeah, it's basically social critique of an economic kind, and now wouldn't you like some Marxist revolution? But there's also the kind of the political version of this, which also you often get from the hard left, um, which it manifests when people want to denounce Israel, but also other societies where, and you see this in a certain genre of film also, but where it's about people who lead undisrupted, comfortable lives who don't realize that horrific crimes are being committed in their name in order to ensure the existence of the protected life that they enjoy, right? And that was especially a kind of a common refrain that was part of the kind of KGB-driven campaign of demoralization in the West during the Cold War, right? Where it's like you think you have a decent society at home, but really, you're committing war crimes in tropical jungles in order to ensure that existence. And I think without entering into it, and talking about the Cold War, because who wants to do that? There's another version of that is also very much a kind of a KGB spun line of attack that has become very common against Israel, and which also gets taken up by the hard left here in Israel, which again is like, you think this is a nice country, you like this about it or that about it, but it's all soaked in blood. It's all actually based on these horrific crimes that are being committed in your name that you're happy to have done, so long as they are shielded from your view, so you don't have to face it. But when you sit there drinking your coffee, your hand is soaked in blood, as Yeshayahu would put it. But then the accusation is being leveled in this way where the implication is the things that the state of Israel has to do in order to ensure its own security are these horrific crimes. It's all horrific crimes that, in a sense, it's not that they in any regard are things that are necessary and good and right in order for the society to have a chance of existing, but more like they're unspeakable and unforgivable crimes that make it so the society clearly doesn't deserve to exist. Like that if it must, in order to exist, do these things, then that's unacceptable and therefore it cannot exist and it's illegitimate, right? That's the hard left argument against the state of Israel. And I think maybe like an Oscar was given to some self-hating Jew who made a movie about Auschwitz a few years ago that was kind of like by a metaphor trying to make a point like that. And the point is that all of these conspiracy theory kinds of moral frameworks, the way they all operate is just destructively. There's no presentation of a way things could work that would be right and would not be oppressive or would not be blood-soaked, but rather it just is about taking the best that people can come up with in terms of good, decent societies that thrive and survive, and then saying, sorry, but we've identified the hidden massacre or the hidden enslavement or whatever else that all of this has to be based on in order for it to function. And that is the sort of indelible mark, the original sin that can't be expunged, and so it all needs to be burned down and replaced. And so that's what haters of Israel say. That's what Marxists who want to destroy societies with functioning markets say. And you hear versions of that in the present day, and it is worth asking yourself, okay, how can I respond to that? What is the argument other than just to say, I know why you're saying this, and I mistrust your motives. I know you really just hate Israel and want to destroy it, and you're not really so interested in equally holding all societies' feet to the fire in terms of how morally perfect they are. Or I know you really just want a Marxist oppression, and you're just trying to say anything to make people have less faith in the basis of their society or what have you. That again, those are fair reasons to reject and ignore this kind of argument. But if you take it, more seriously on its merits and say, well, like, how do I get beyond this view? Because it is it's a hard thing to answer, because the whole premise of the argument is that we're talking about things that you don't see, right? That it's all about being able to say, well, although you may say, well, you didn't murder anyone, and you didn't hold a lash over anyone who was slaving in front of you. So although it's the case, your hands are still soaked in blood, or you're still an oppressor, but it's all indirect and it's all invisible. How can you answer that? How can you respond to a claim that is premised on the notion that we're talking about things that are not really directly in your view? And I think the point is, again, now we're better positioned to think these through now that we talked about Stone, we've talked about David, we've talked about Torah and how Torah means to function. What it comes down to, I can say very concretely, where I live, I can hear sometimes the distant sounds of explosions in Gaza, where they're fighting the war currently. And if you ask, if a sort of anti-war, burn society down hard leftist cynic comes along and says, oh, well, how can you sleep at night with the horrors that are being done in your name? You do have to think through, okay, well, what is my responsibility for what's being done? What's my connection to it? And how do I know what I'm hearing about it is the truth? And how do I know it's not propaganda to hide the truth from me? Right? Those are the questions of any individual in a polity all the time. And I think the point is, again, it comes back to the answer being, what do you have in common with the other people in the society that you're a part of? For some societies, the most that anyone can say is, well, what I have in common is we've all got a social security number, or we all believe in voting every 4 years. Or in some other society, it might be, what we have in common is we all really like this one kind of cheese, and we like to wear hats that are shaped like this. And those kinds of bases for commonality are very thin, and it pretty quickly just gets beyond you to know, like, what would someone else who's my countryman do in some variety of circumstances, and would I approve of that, and would it align with what I might consider just or right? And what we have, Baruch Hashem, in the Judaic society, and more so as time goes on, is a very rich basis for saying, oh, well, first of all, we're a small society, we're a very connected society, we all know each other, 2-3 degrees of separation, and you can get to almost anyone. And through those degrees of separation, you also encounter people who have studied a lot of the same texts and are really committed to a lot of the same practices, in ways that demonstrate that this is not just a game for them, but that they believe Hashem is watching and that He is the judge. And when you add all that up, and then you sort of compare that situation to this sort of silly movie about, the whistleblower in the CIA who's revealing to everyone that actually, their country is doing unspeakable evil in secret and blah blah blah, which is a dozen or like probably 100 movies at this point that Hollywood has made about the CIA or things like it. That by comparison, when you talk about it, in Israel, yeah, of course, there still can be things that this or that person will do that maybe you wouldn't sign up for, but you never actually can control or know all of those things. But what you can know is the collective that you're a part of, how high content is your relationship across those different degrees of separation to everyone, and how are they bound to you, and how you are both bound together before HaKadosh Baruch Hu via the Torah. And the more that becomes the case, the more that the Torah becomes the basis for that gluing together of society, the more that it becomes the case that there is a broad distribution of a lot of that content and commitment, the more you start to be able to trust me. You say, look, I wasn't there when, this or that thing happened, but I know who was there, or I know people who know who was there. I'm not so separate from them. I'm not so different from them. I have these things in common with them. And I trust them more than I trust some Marxist propagandist spinning a tale about some other thing that happened than what I heard, right?